Shout-outs this week to some listeners who told me they like our music episodes. Rich from Madison, Wisconsin, Sarah from Las Vegas, Melissa from Santa Barbara, California. We have a great episode in store for you guys today. A couple of things from our email inbox. One listener wants to know if we plan on doing any new episodes on classic PR disasters. That's one of our favorite topics too, so if you have a case that you think we should look at, get in touch with us and we'll consider it. Send your thoughts to me at tim@shapingopinion.com. If you want, we can give you a shout out. And as always, thank you for being a listener of the Shaping Opinion podcast. You're the reason we do this. This is Shaping Opinion, a production of O'Brien Communications.
Thanks for being here. Thank you to Erika for having us and the whole Bluebird staff. It's going to be fun. So, the one and only Terry McBride is here tonight. Thank you, Lord. The one and only Bill Luther is here. You can't miss him. J.T. Harding. All right. How many first-time Bluebird folks? Wow!
Can you describe a typical Bluebird performance? Who performs, how many performers, where they sit, and where the audience sits?
Well, a typical Bluebird performance and kind of our standard format is this in the round that you see here, where 4 chairs are facing each other, the 4 songwriters are facing each other, and they kind of trade off songs and stories and really bring the audience into the experience. They're in the center of the room, the tables are around them, and even though when the room is empty, it does feel like there's some maneuverability in the room. When the room is seated, there's no maneuverability. And that means that people are sort of in each other's armpits. The songwriters are right there with people really very much next to them. And it becomes a musical experience that's really quite extraordinary.
I'm Tim O'Brien. In this episode of the Shaping Opinion podcast, we're joined by Erika Wollam Nichols. She's the general manager of Nashville's legendary Bluebird Café. It's the place where country stars like Garth Brooks and Taylor Swift got their start. The premise of our podcast is simple. We talk about people, events, and things that have shaped the way we think. Today we'll talk with Erika about the story behind the Bluebird Café, some of its own history, and the impact this little place in a Nashville strip mall has had on country music and songwriting. If you were to drive down Hillsborough Pike, not far from downtown Nashville, you could easily miss it. The Bluebird Café is tucked into a small strip mall and is as unassuming as it might have been the day it opened in 1982. It's known as a songwriter's performance space. It has only 90 seats, but still plays host to new and upcoming songwriters and accomplished artists on any given night. Normally, the music is acoustic. The genres can range from country and bluegrass to pop, rock, and contemporary Christian music. In addition to Garth Brooks and Taylor Swift, Bluebird audiences have had the chance to listen to Keith Urban, Kathy Mattea, Trisha Yearwood, Faith Hill, Vince Gill, Leanne Rimes, John Prine, Phil Vassar, and many, many writers who have created songs for the biggest names in music. Amy Curlin founded the Bluebird Café in 1982, and in 2008 she sold it to the Nashville Songwriters Association International. It was more of a donation than a sale. The Nashville Songwriters Association is a nonprofit organization dedicated to the craft of songwriting. The Bluebird Café gained even broader attention in 2012 when the hit ABC television drama Nashville featured the Bluebird in its ongoing plotline. Erika Wollam Nichols is the GM and Chief Operating Officer of the Bluebird.
I started here at the Bluebird as a waitress in 1984, and at that time the Bluebird Café was not the mecca of songwriting that it was or that it has become. At the time, the Bluebird served lunch, dinner, and then there was music afterwards. So there were actually 3 shifts of employees. The lunch fancy dinner, and then some music, because Amy Kurland, our founder, had a boyfriend who played guitar and thought it would be a good idea if they'd put up a little stage and play. And so right about then, when I started, the music that was happening here was mostly bands. And it was on the stage, and it was plugged in, Steve Earle, people that, were loud. And at that time, the room was loud. And one night, Amy had, somebody was helping her book the club, and they booked a songwriter show. And the songwriters were in here, and Amy noticed how well the room worked with acoustic music. And so the transition kind of started there. In 1985, 86, in that area was when a couple of the writers who played here regularly on stage decided to pull the show down into the middle of the room. That was Tom Schuyler, Don Schlitz, Paul Overstreet, and Fred Knobloch. And they figured if they put the show in the middle of the room, people would be quiet. And sure enough, that's what happened. So I was here that whole sort of transition time. In my senior year of college, I was taking a PR and marketing class, and Amy and I were roommates at the time. She was taking a marketing class, and we came up with this survey, which we did here, and we surveyed people to see if they would listen to music during the dinner hour. And once we kind of got that feel that yes, they would, then Amy stopped serving lunch because it was just too much to manage. And we started doing an early show and a late show with music and food at both shows. So from my perspective, I was involved in some of that transition and saw a lot of it through. When I graduated from college, I went home, and Amy coerced me into taking a job booking a big music festival. I was supposed to actually go to graduate school. I was a philosophy major, not a music anything, although I did sing. And I came back and started booking that festival and ended up doing that for 5 years and kind of gave up my graduate school Friedrich Nietzsche plans and started working in the music business. So I went from here to that festival to another festival, the Tin Pan South Songwriters Festival, produced that, went to the Country Music Hall of Fame and helped open the new building, and then came back here when Amy wanted to retire.
I know we're going to talk a little bit about the whole story of the Bluebird, but there's been this continuity with the Bluebird, and we'll talk about the change in ownership. But Amy ran this place from the time she founded it in 1982 until she sold it in 2008.
Yes.
And in 2008 she sold it, and after that you took over from her. So there's been this continuity, and I know that there was this one thing that I think you might have said is we can only be the best Bluebird we can be. So you really have the spirit of the Bluebird. How would you describe that, the spirit of the Bluebird? What is the best Bluebird the Bluebird can be?
Well, unlike many performance spaces, we are kind of we're a lab, we're a growth space, we're a space of opportunity. And after, for example, the television show Nashville hit and throngs of people came here, we could have changed our entire format to have hit songwriters 7 nights a week, 2 shows a night. But it was really important to the Bluebird, important to me to carry that on, where we have an open mic, where anybody can play their original song, and our auditions where people, bring a minute of a song and are judged on that minute of a song, and then it opens a door for them. And our early shows today are still those up-and-coming writers, most of the time, those up-and-coming writers who don't yet have a publishing deal. And then the later shows are more the touring songwriters, hit songwriters. So that process is really important. And I think it distinguishes us in a very sort of codified way of being who we are. So when other people are presenting songwriters, sometimes they feel competitive with the Bluebird, and sometimes our staff will be like, oh no, somebody else is opening a songwriters club. But for us, it's about this and making this as authentic as possible. And authentic is an overused word these days, but there is definitely always a conversation that the staff has. It's like, is this what we should be doing? Is this who we are? Do we change things for a reason, and I really wanted to dig my heels in and have dug my heels in about change. And I just think it's important not only to the up-and-coming writers, but to the writers who have been our family for years and years and years, that we maintain this atmosphere and this opportunity for people to present their craft.
Well, one of the things that's a signature sound for the Bluebird is its acoustic. How important is that to Bluebird being the best Bluebird it can be?
Most of the time. But on Monday nights, we have Mike Henderson's blues band, and Mike Henderson absolutely refuses to have anybody shushed. So, in fact, he'll start playing gospel songs if anybody tries to shush anybody. So, and Mike's he's been playing here since I was bartending here, and he's probably one of the longest running acts in town anymore. And so that show is plugged in, and we do periodic plugged in shows. But the constant on that is the listening atmosphere, the listening room atmosphere, and the way that songs are presented so that people can really experience the song at its very basic level.
Well, there have been some big artists that started here, and people know the names. And if you read about the Bluebird, it's almost repetitive, but everyone knows Garth Brooks started here. Everyone knows that Taylor Swift started here. When you've seen these big names, either the ones that started here or the ones that didn't start here, but that come in here, even to perform, how have they commented on it? Because they played to arenas, and they come here. What is so special about it to them?
Many people are scared. If they're used to playing arenas, here you can see we don't have a distance. There's no separation. And so that creates a different kind of atmosphere, I think, for people. Vince Gill lives close by and will pop in. And there is that welcoming kind of an atmosphere, that easy kind of an atmosphere. And maybe in many ways the fact that we've maintained the Bluebird as it is comfortable to a lot of people. They know what to expect. I mean, they certainly know what to expect with the staff. So many of the staff have been here 15 years and beyond that, folks that walk in are like hugging everybody in the place because they're family. So I think there's sort of a double thing. I mean, you'll hear artists say, playing at the Bluebird is terrifying because of the history and what's happened here. And yet playing at the Bluebird is one of their favorite things to do because of, I think there's a lot of factors to that. I mean, even sitting in the round where the writers are facing each other, it gives the writers a chance to be the audience too. When they're listening to the person across from them play a song, they're not on stage anymore. They're in appreciation of that song or maybe accompanying, and it creates, I don't know, it's a different kind of experience for both the audience and the performers.
Well, you mentioned the history. Let's talk about some of that history, and for anyone that may not have heard it, I'm going to mention some names, and if you can, just tell me some of their history with the Bluebird. And I have to start with some of the ones that everyone knows, or most everyone knows. Taylor Swift started at the age of 14, and the story goes that Scott Borchetta, who was a record company executive, saw her here. And she proved, as he said, she could work a room that night. She held her own with 3 other male performers, and he signed her promptly. How much of that is true and how much of that is legend?
The description may not be exactly linguistically correct, but what happened was Scott had met her a couple of days before and talked with her and was impressed with her. And she said, "Hey, I'm playing at the Bluebird on Thursday night," or whatever it was. "Why don't you come down?" And he did, and he was impressed with that, her ability to not only hold a room, but her kind of intrinsic sense of herself and the songs that she was writing and performing. And I think he would say, and I think that she would say, I mean, her goal was to be not just an artist, because she had an artist deal, and she let it go because of her songwriting. And she really wanted her songs to be how she presented herself and not have to perform anybody else's songs. And I think Scott saw that in her and agreed with that tenacity and her own goal of that. And so I think that's a byproduct of this kind of performance, is you really see how somebody can relate to an audience, and also you can listen to their songs and see how those songs are going over. Because if you're sitting like right next to somebody who's playing a song, you're going to react to that song whether you like it or not. And so that's a way you can see in this room kind of how songs are working.
And how would you describe it when you say someone can hold a room, or Scott Pershetta said how somebody can work a room? How does an artist hold a room?
Well, there's a variety of different ways. But I think when in this room, when the air kind of goes out of the room, when a song is being performed that people recognize is incredibly meaningful. And so you can sit in this room and you can hear funny songs and, playful songs, but there'll be a song that comes up that stops somebody. And it might be a sad song, or it might just be an amazingly well-constructed song, but everybody locks in. And I think that's what it is the song can lock you in. And for Taylor's performance, for her, not only her presence, but how she presented the songs was what probably, I think, spoke to Scott.
Well, here's another one, Faith Hill. And again, this is another one. It may be a legend, it may not be. You can tell me if it is. But it says she signed a handshake deal in the hallway after she performed.
Faith had been performing with Gary Burr, who is a noted songwriter here in town, and he had been trying to get his own record deal, and so was performing with a band all around town. And he decided he was going to give it one last shot here at the Bluebird, and Faith had been singing backup with him. And so they performed, and a lot of the record executives were here. Everyone left except Martha Sharp from Warner Brothers Records. And she approached Gary, and Gary was like, all right, somebody finally sees my talent and my ability to be a star. And she said, well, I'd really like to get Faith's number from you because we want to sign her.
So she came through as a backup singer.
She did, yeah.
What did they see?
Oh, I mean, Faith has she has an incredible presence and an ability to bring a song to life. And so in that background, I mean, they performed a song that she loved and she wanted to sing with Gary, improved herself with Gary. And so for her, that was like an expression. And I think it's always been that way for her.
Another person, another big name, Garth Brooks. And again, it was described that he signed a handshake deal in the hallway.
It's actually the kitchen, but who's checking? So yes, and Garth to this day will, traipse in here with his guitar over his shoulder and a clean shirt on a hanger because he's just so wonderful. And I think that's when he was going around town trying to get a record deal, he went to many, many places, many of the labels, and everybody passed on him. He happened to be here scheduled on a showcase night. We used to do these Nashville Entertainment Association showcases. He was supposed to be the last performer. Ralph Murphy, I believe, got sick, and so they moved Garth up. And Lynn Schultz was at the bar from Capitol Records. And when he saw Garth perform in front of this room of people and saw how they reacted to him, I think he thought again. He said to Garth, come into the kitchen, I want to talk to you. And then they signed the deal the next day.
How many record executives come here? Or I shouldn't say how many, but how often do record executives come to the Bluebird?
I wouldn't say it's every day. And the industry is different now than it was in 1987, where people were kind of discovered and plucked out of things. Now there's a bigger network. So more like Taylor Swift, where she was, she had relationships, she had people she was talking to, and then came and performed for people. So in that way, I don't think it's nearly as many people just sort of popping in. obviously we have a lot more tourists coming here to the Bluebird, so it's a different situation for the room too. But I do think it provides a piece of that patchwork that brings people to that kind of a deal. So coming in, seeing somebody at the Bluebird can create an understanding of who they are. And so I would say, it's not unheard of that publishers and record label folks are here. It's a little bit more controlled maybe now.
Speaking of controlled, I know that one of the things that we do in the PR field is we'll do focus groups or we'll do research to see how certain things work or don't work. And when you were describing the Bluebird earlier with some of these artists, it made me think of that, because if I'm a record executive sitting in this room and I watch the performance, and whether I like it or not sometimes doesn't matter to me, because I want to look around and see the reaction. And you can see that in a room like this, not only the applause or the quietness, but you can see the expressions on people's faces when certain things happen. How important is that to these record executives?
Well, I think that you're looking for an artist who has charisma and who can really move people. And I think that is significant for performances in this room. And I think you're betting a lot of money on an artist. So right away you want to know, even if they're undeveloped, do they have that ability? Do they have, we see it in our auditions. So we'll have 65 people come and audition. Everybody plays a minute of a song on a Sunday morning. And the room is just filled with the writers and the judges. And you can see, of those 65 people, can look around and see, oh, that person, or that person. Maybe not. And most of the time, it doesn't matter whether that minute of a song is dynamite. But you can tell somebody who is not only going to bring that kind of charisma and energy to the table, but somebody who is willing to do the work, because they just lock in. You can see that. So I think in that way, when there's a crowd of people, there's an energy to some folks that you can really tap into.
One of the things that the artists, people talk about the Bluebird in the context of the artists, the famous ones that have come from here, and obviously the TV series Nashville that highlighted the Bluebird. But I guess the question then is, what did the Bluebird do for them? Well, what did the Bluebird do for those artists?
I would say you could probably talk to hundreds of people, not just artists, but songwriters, and each one would have a different story about what piece the Bluebird played in the puzzle of their career. Whether it's Tony Arata, who wrote the dance, playing the dance with Garth, and Garth saying, when I get a record deal, or if I get a record deal, I'm going to cut that song, and both of them bursting into laughter because the room was half full at the time. That is one piece of the puzzle. There's a story that Jason Isbell tells about a song called Streetlights that he had not recorded, played here, and messed up one of the lines. And all the other writers loved it. And so he has not changed that line. So the song became what it is because of how he performed it mistakenly here. Whether it's a writer connecting to a writer, whether it's we have writers here that we have do some of our corporate events. Sometimes that's the money that those writers make, that their songs are not yet published, that their royalties are down, and so this money matters. And so it's a variety of things that we believe that we can bring to the table. Sometimes we understand them, and sometimes it's happenstance that you don't even know. Somebody's met somebody in the round and written an amazing song, and I hear about it. I'm like, oh yeah, remember that show that I played with so-and-so? Well, he and I got together and wrote 3 times, and this is a number 1. Wow, that is all of those stories are really gratifying and make it feel like, okay, when the days are tough here at the Bluebird, then you remember those stories and know that this place matters to people, not just to the audience, but really to the writers too.
Well, you mentioned the writers, and I have to talk about the writers because here's one of the interesting things, too. People may hear names like Garth Brooks and Taylor Swift and think they're going to find the next Garth Brooks when they come here as a audience member. But really, these are songwriters performing songs that they've written. And that's a big part of this because they're songwriters, so they're not necessarily performers. And a lot of these people don't aspire to play before arenas. They want their songs to be played before arenas, but not necessarily be the ones doing it. So the musicians themselves may not always be that Garth Brooks level performance, but the songs are the thing, and that is definitely the thing at the Bluebird. So I guess my question is, we talked about the famous artists that have come from the Bluebird. Have there been any individual songs that debuted here or that kind of started here and caught on, or a record executive heard the song here and took that song to another artist and played it? What songs came out of the big Bluebird?
Yeah, as I talked to you about the dance, for sure, I have heard so many stories, but I can't tell you exactly the names of songs because we don't always hear those stories and how obscure that is.
You can be sure, even if the song didn't debut here, though, you had a songwriter working a song out while he or she was here.
Absolutely. Maren Morris played My Church here for the very first time. She played it in public. So things like that,
Mm-hmm.
we hear those kind of stories, and I didn't know that until we were filming Maren for our documentary. So there are so many.
And those songs, we talk about shaping opinion with this podcast, but those songs they get inside people's lives because they remember the artist. But if that was a favorite song of theirs, maybe it was a song they played at a wedding, or somebody's favorite song, their dad's favorite song, their mother's favorite song. So that's where, and a lot of that starts not necessarily in the Bluebird, but with the people that perform here.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. The memories that people attach to songs are so important, and I think that's part of the lure of the Bluebird. When we have somebody like Roger Cook who wrote "Long Cool Woman in a Black Dress," and I'd like to teach the world to sing. And I mean, Roger is as current today as some of our younger writers who have top 40 hits, because he can come in and play those songs. Everybody knows those songs. It's like Don Schlitz playing The Gambler. It's like, that song, somebody wrote that song?
It just happened.
Yeah, it just sort of comes from the ether. But no, those are real people writing real songs that, are like of our souls. And when you see this room, when Don Schlitz plays The Gambler in this room, and you see the entire room singing along, it's just amazing.
Well, that actually takes me back to Amy, that you mentioned her founding of it, and then when she sold the Bluebird, she could have sold it she could have made a lot of money, but she decided to sell it to the Songwriters Association. And that goes back to everything that we talk about here with the culture of the Bluebird and the priority of it being a songwriter's place. Could you describe how important that was to Amy and how that was specified?
Yeah. So, I've known Amy a long time and been through a lot of situations with her at the Bluebird and worked for her for many years back and forth. So when she was ready to retire, she talked to me and she's like, well, what if I sell it to NSAI and it becomes always for the songwriters? Because that was her goal, that it would always remain. It wouldn't be, Coca-Cola's Bluebird, no offense to Coke. But I think that certainty that it would always be regarded in its full importance, that runs right alongside to the importance of songs and songwriters. And Amy is, a huge songwriter advocate. So in order to make sure that this tiny place never changed, that was the goal.
I have another question for you. We've talked about the Nashville TV series and how that, now, I guess let's talk about the whole story behind the Nashville TV series. Why did it, or how did it decide to make the Bluebird integral to the plot line?
Callie Corey had worked here in town at TGI Fridays when she was living here, and she loved Nashville. So creating this show about Nashville, not only was it important to her, but pieces of Nashville were important to her. And she wanted the show to be as real as possible. Not a Dallas, not a set in Hollywood, but really show what the Nashville music community was, the Nashville community itself. And so she will say it too, that if you're talking about Nashville, you have to talk about songwriters, because songwriters are the backbone. They're the air we breathe. And in order to talk about the songwriters, she wanted the Bluebird involved in that. So that's when I got a call in March of 2010, I guess, from Steve Buchanan, who was an executive producer who I'd known for years. And he said, what do you think about the Bluebird being involved in this television show? Now, at the time, our budget was not good. And so we needed something. We had sold nameplates on chairs. We had done a benefit month where all the songwriters donated money from every show to keep our doors open. We needed something. And we didn't get paid to be in the television show. I thought, well, this is an opportunity for us to really make something that can keep us afloat. And it did. And our merchandise sales are a big part of that have happened. I mean, we sell a lot right out of this door, not online, right here. And the Nashville television show brought attention. It was a weekly commercial on national television. So it was a great opportunity, and it had a downside too.
What's the downside?
Well, the downside was, besides the actual physical part of hundreds of people here, and as you know, we're in a strip mall, so hundreds of people in front of a strip mall on a busy road is tough. And people got like, oh my gosh, anxious, hysterical, crying if they couldn't get in, banging on the door when I'd be counting money on a Sunday morning, waving a $20 bill at me to get in the door. I mean, crazy stuff. And that was hard to manage. And we got a lot of criticism from the same people who were banging on the doors that we weren't managing crowds well. But it was sort of like, so it was hard for our location to have that kind of attention. And then the psychological, philosophical part was people came to the Bluebird because it was a celebrity. And they didn't know what we did, and they didn't care what we did, and they just had to be in here.
Well, then once that happened, actually I read something one time, and I think it was Amy who said this, that when the Bluebird was famous on Nashville, one of the things that she liked about the way it was portrayed in that series was you had everything going on in the narrative of the plot line of that episode. So you had greed, you had lust, you had dishonesty, you had whatever. But when they featured the Bluebird, that was always a safe place. It was always a good place. That's how she described it. I don't know if you'd ever heard her say that.
No, I never did. That's good, though.
And I thought, well, that's a good way to say it, because the Nashville show had a reputation.
There was a lot of intention about our relationship with the television show. I went to California and went into the writer's room with them, and told Callie would call me and say, well, how would you do this? Or how do the waitresses write their tickets, and what would happen here? And, I got to be on the show, and several of the staff got to be on the show because she wanted it to be really real. And so I think there was really an intention that we sort of followed what the Bluebird really was, even though Deacon couldn't call and get a gig tonight.
Not tonight. Well, you mentioned earlier that you weren't a songwriter, but you said you like to sing. Is there a particular, have you ever had the urge to...
I've done it.
To do open mic night?
Oh, no, I haven't done open mic. I don't have to do that. I can do anything.
What have you done?
No, when I graduated from college, I sang on the Sunday night writers' night.
You did?
When Harlan Howard was here, and gave me a pat on the head, told me I did a good job. So that's.
Do you remember the song that you sang? Or
I did. It was Thanksgiving Eve. It's a Bob Franke song.
Would you be able to sing it right now?
No. I sang it a cappella, though.
Oh, you did, huh?
I did.
Do you ever sing now in public?
Periodically. They do some group shows here in Nashville, so I'll sing them. But I'm more of a visual artist. So.
There you go. What's the future hold for the Bluebird?
Well, we're just getting ready to have distribution on our documentary that we've been working on for 2.5 years, which is exciting. And we premiered it at South by Southwest, and we'll have a New York, LA, and Nashville premiere in the fall. So that's great. So that is sort of like our next step into helping people understand who we are and what we do. We've been involved in country to country in London and have gotten requests from Germany to bring Bluebird shows over there, to Amsterdam, to Australia. So in many ways, I feel like this place is like the little hub, and then we can branch out to take what we do around the world and give people a taste of the Bluebird, because we can't change the size of this room. That's really important, that we stay like we are. But how do we share that experience? That's, I think, what we're kind of talking about now. And maintaining, how do we maintain this ability to nurture the songwriter?
Erika, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been fun to talk about the Bluebird with you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks so much. Thank you all.
To learn more about Nashville's Bluebird Café, please see our show notes at shapingopinion.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please let people know by leaving a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. You can subscribe to the Shaping Opinion podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. We'd love to hear from you. On Twitter, just tweet to us at Shaping Opinion, or you can get in touch with us through our website, shapingopinion.com. We have a Facebook page, and we're on Instagram at Shaping Opinion. Shaping Opinion is a production of O'Brien Communications. This is where we talk about people, events, and things that have shaped the way we think. Until next time, I'm Tim O'Brien.